I got it. So I'm going to talk first about trespass, and we're going to talk about, Tony's going to talk about drones. I gave him the fun topic. I think this is the only PowerPoint, and then we're going to turn over to the sheriff's deputies to talk about what you do when this happens, because all we can tell you is what the law is, and they have to tell you what to do to kind of get people to enforce it. So I'm going to talk about trespass in the Department of Ag and Resource Economics. I'm also part of the Ag Education Initiative. There's all our information. There's some more information. None of this is legal advice. I'm glad Megan's recording me, so I have a record that I told you all that. Let's talk about what a trespasser is. Who knows what a trespasser is to start with?
Somebody on your property that's uninvited.
Yeah.
And that has been told not to be there.
Yes, in most cases, there's a couple of cases I'm going to bring up what the law is, I think, on this part. Yeah, you guys have hit pretty much what it is. It's someone who comes on your property without consent and remains there without your consent. You may have told them to go on your property, or may have not told them to get off your property, they just may be there. What happens if we have no trespassing sign? We told them not to be there. What if you have blue paint on trees on the property line and you told them not to be there? You have. So if you have no trespassing signs, stuff like that, you've automatically done this. Trespass is weird. We have two types of trespass. We have civil trespass, which is where you go to court, you sue for damages, and we have criminal trespass, where that's where local law enforcement gets involved and enforces whatever the next part is, which I think is the next slide. Yeah. There are 4 types of criminal trespass in Maryland. I think I have Delaware's up here too. After this, if I remember how I put this presentation together correctly, I stole my undergrad slides, how I teach them trespass, to teach you guys, mainly because it laid it out pretty simply. But I had to add the Delaware, and so I think I have Delaware in after this. Well, I'll find out next. So, if you occupy a property clearly posted with no trespassing signs, or has the blue paint as required by DNR regulations, I believe it's a blue X on trees on the property line. You have clearly marked the property for no trespassing. How many no trespassing signs should you have on your property? I don't know, the state law says signs, so as long as you have more than 2, I have a checklist, and I forgot to bring copies of it today, that will tell you how many signs to come up with. And if you come up with 1 sign on the list, you did the list incorrectly. It should always get you to at least 2 signs. I tried to make it to where it always came up with 2 signs because the state law says signs. So you have to mark the property clearly. Also, if you have your property marked with a private driveway, something that clearly denotes your driveway is private, people cannot pull on your driveway, that's a trespass. If they come on your property after you've told them to leave, we already had somebody say that, that's trespass. And then if you enter cultivated land and tear it up, that is also clearly defined as trespass in the state law. So, based on that, the state law, anyone facing that faces 90 days in jail or a $500 fine. Delaware, it's first-degree criminal trespass if you unlawfully enter and remain in a livestock facility knowingly. So if you've been told not to go in or have no trespassing signs posted on the property, that is clearly trespassing. I did not bring in all the other forms of criminal trespass in Delaware, just because most of them match Maryland's. This was the only difference within them. So Delaware clearly sets apart livestock facilities. So poultry would be in that. So if anybody's from Delaware has a poultry facility, you put no trespassing signs up on the property, that is criminal trespass within it. First degree criminal trespass, if I put it up there again, that's up to a year in prison and a $2,300 fine in Delaware. That's not for Maryland. Yes?
So on poultry houses, some of the companies will put a no admittance sign. Well, does that suffice as no trespassing?
Yes, yeah. As long as it clearly tells somebody not to go inside.
So those biosecurity signs that we gave out count as a no trespassing sign?
I can't remember the wording on them.
No admittance without owner permission. You said it worked.
That worked, because I did clearly say, don't go in the building, or on the property. Because yours were set up at the gates, so I at least put them on notice. But again, you would need multiple signs to fit the law. Okay, that's criminal trespass. We also have civil trespass, where you commit a tort against somebody else. So you have to occupy and exercise control over someone else's property. This could be personal property, it could be real property. That exercise control of your property occurred because of the other party's physical act. So they did something to come on your property and they physically took control over it. And they did it without your permission. That's civil trespass. If that happens, you're allowed to sue them for damages that happened on the property while they were on the property trespassing. My basic example is always, you have an ATV rider riding across your property tearing up crops. They've not only committed criminal trespass, as we just talked about earlier, because that's cultivated land and they've clearly torn up a crop. Now they're also facing civil damages for the damages to the crop. So they could get hit with a two-edged sword in this case. What are your best strategies? Post a no trespassing sign, use blue paint, post them all over the place. You can usually get no trespassing signs pretty cheap. I have a checklist available. It won't tell you exactly where to post them, but it'll tell you how many you need. It'll go through and give you a whole list of things you need to think about where to post no trespassing signs.
And the blue paint is for Delaware as well?
I have to go back and look at Delaware. I cannot remember specifically, but most states allow, it's either blue or purple paint, depending on the state. Most states are blue and some states have turned it over to purple paint just because it's easier for folks to see in some cases. Fence the property off. Plant natural buffers that prevent people from coming on the property to prevent some of this, and the ability to see stuff from the road. Get your signage, post it, that helps. And then think about strategies such as the, planting natural buffers, things you can do to make your property less visible and hide it from folks. We do a lot of poultry stuff on this website, so if anybody wants to register and sign up for Southern Ag Today, which is basically a farm management, farm finance, farm policy, farm trade, ag law, specialty crops. I can't remember all the categories covered on it, but we do it every weekday. There's a different topic. Ag law is Fridays. And I still gotta figure out what I'm supposed to write about, because I owe a post next week and it's gotta be 250 words, so I gotta think about that later. That's the beauty, everything on here has to be 250 to 300 words. It's not too long, it's just perfect. And we do a lot of poultry stuff on it, although every now and again some of the numbers turn out to be wrong because the person that does them is out of Auburn and their numbers are different than out here, and John has pointed that out to me and that person many times. I also do a blog at agris.umd.edu. You can sign up there as well. And I think the next one is I do a podcast. I read them to you because I have to provide a transcript. And you can find that. You can actually find it on agris.umd.edu. And I think it's time for questions. So we can kind of hold questions until we get through with the
Oh, you do have one. Go ahead.
Oh, I see one.
Question. So what if that there's no posting or, there's no trespassing sign or anything? How can a landowner, seek any criminal or civil damages?
I'm going to turn that over to those gentlemen in the back.
Sure, if it's not posted, the person would have to be duly notified. So if you notify them, in writing or by mouth, or you have us do that for you, and then they come back to the front, at that point, they'd be trespassing and they could be charged.
Any other, one more question.
People, probably most of them are environmental people who are doing the drones and trespassing without your permission. Are you familiar at all with the legal tortious interference, which inhibits your ability to make a living?
I am
They
familiar
have
with it,
one
but it's
thing
been a
to do
while
is-
since I remember all the elements of how all that plays out.
Yeah, because those environmental people have one thing in common in their mind is to put you out of business. And to do that, they would have to interfere with me making a living. And I did a little bit of research on that, so if you come up with something, then inform the people about it.
Okay. That's a good topic. I can work on that.
So Paul, what about waterways? Because we do see people coming up waterways and things like that. What is the rules on that?
I'm trying to remember what the state rules are on waterways. I'm gonna let Tony handle that one since I see his hand up.
Maryland owns the land underneath of all tidal water, all navigable water. So the land from mean high water towards the channel is all public. So anyone can canoe up, do whatever. They cannot get out of there, you know, disembark or whatever you want to call it. They can't get out of their canoe and walk up onto your property. They can't even walk on the shoreline unless they are below mean high water.
That question.
And the same applies if you have waterways that are coming through your property or adjacent to your property. Make sure you have your no trespassing signs and your paint facing the waterway as well.
That will prevent folks from coming on.
It won't prevent them. But
Well, it won't prevent, but
it'll
it
give
can
you
better
a remedy.
gauge. Yes,
What
ma'am.
about state-owned ditches?
State-owned ditches, they have the ability to be there, but they cannot impede
Just
you.
like-
It's a public right of way, and then if they start impeding stuff, that's when law enforcement has to get involved.
Well, and remember too, for those, just because the state has a right of way, that doesn't mean that it's always public.
Sure.
You know, a lot of times, State Highway, for example, they have lots of stormwater management, things like, those aren't public right of ways. Those are devices that the state controls, and the state's responsible for maintaining them. So the state and their contractors have access, but not the public.
Any other questions for Paul? All right, and we're gonna let Tony go on up. Tony, did you have any slides you wanna share? Or?
I don't, I called Paul the other day, I said, geez, you've got this long PowerPoint, and I don't have anything, because drones, the only thing I could do is show you a picture of a drone. I don't think anybody really needs that.
Turn this off.
Go ahead.
No, sorry, I was just going real quick.
That's all right.
I gotta say this, that's the shortest I've ever heard Paul talk. Does anybody ever see him go shorter than that?
No.
I mean, look, they're all in awe of you, Paul. They're all sitting here going, what the what?
This seemed like a topic we could cover real quickly.
Anyway, Tony?
Sure. My name's Tony Gorski. I'm an attorney out of Annapolis. This is where my office is. I'm a Dorchester County native. Grew up here on the shore. And my grandparents were farmers, watermen, that sort of thing, carpenters. As we know here on the shore, if you're a waterman or a farmer, you're going to be doing carpentry, mechanics work, and all these other things too to make ends meet. And I specialize in environmental law primarily, and an aspect of that is agriculture. I've worked with farmers, growers. I've been doing poultry work for Delmarva Chicken Association back when it was DPI. I've been doing that for over 20 years. I've worked with them. I've worked with individual farmers on crops as well as animal agriculture. And typically it's on the environmental side. I've done, for example, I've done some drift pesticide and herbicide drift litigation over the years, insurance coverage and that sort of stuff. And I do land use and zoning, which unfortunately, as the state's grown, that's encroaching more on farming and agriculture than it ever has in the past. And so that's my background. I used to be in the Attorney General's office at the Department of the Environment. And so I did enforcement cases with sediment erosion control that you all see once in a while, nutrient management plans, those kinds of things. I did all of that work from the state side. And I work co-teaching with Paul and work on things with the University of Maryland. I also teach environmental law and business law at Johns Hopkins to the engineering program. So I have a lot of experience in these issues, and my background is I have a natural resources management, wildlife and fisheries degree from Frostburg State, and I have a master's degree in environmental law and a JD from the Vermont Law School. So enough about me. And I don't have slides primarily because there's so little that is actually in place about drone regulations and managing drones. The primary distinction has become recreational versus non-recreational, or commercial versus non-commercial. And that's where the feds draw the line. The FAA doesn't protect privacy, doesn't protect you from trespassers. The FAA is concerned with 400 feet and higher. 400 feet and down is controlled by the state. In Maryland, and I didn't find what the law was in Delaware, but I know at the federal level, the federal government controls until you get to 400 feet. Once you're below 400 feet, they leave it up to the states. States have gone back and forth between letting local government control things and not. Maryland in 2017 passed a state law that preempts all local control of drone regulation. Drones are allowed to be used, flown in the state of Maryland. Any regulation has to come from the state Department of Transportation, would be the primary regulator for it, and they don't have any regulations for it. They follow the federal system basically, and what's interesting, I gave this talk just in, or a similar talk on drones back in June, and since then, some things have changed. And it's interesting because what's happened is just literally in August, the FAA started putting different things up on their website about drones. And the interesting distinction, and it gets to your question for Paul, but the interesting distinction is that now they are getting more definitive about what's commercial or non-commercial. And recreational is really, truly just recreational. It's about taking pictures for yourself. It's about looking at your own property. It's about racing drones, and there are designated flying spaces around the states, around the country. You can find them online, where they are sort of open air spaces where people can come and race their drones, and they do I don't know if anyone has seen it, but there's actually on cable or probably live stream as well. Sorry, showing my age. There's a show called BattleBots. Anybody seen BattleBots? That show? I love it. It's a great show. Anyway, BattleBots. There is a similar drone kind of show where they race indoors in big warehouses, and they set up these circles and they have these races, and these things go more than 100 miles an hour. I mean, these drones really move. And those are, of course, much smaller. But what we're talking about here, really, and that's truly recreational. If you're doing it just for fun, once you start doing it for a purpose, you're not recreational anymore. If you're doing it to fly over someone and take a picture to see whether or not you think they have environmental violations, you're not recreational. If you're doing it to spy on your neighbor, you're not recreational. If you're doing it to look for storm damage, you're not recreational. If you have a purpose, you're not a recreational drone user. And the law at the federal level exempts recreational drone users, but not.
Yeah, I have a question based on what you just said.
Okay.
And what you said earlier. You said if you're looking for storm damage, you're not recreational, but what if you're looking for storm damage on your own property?
That's not that's. I mean, if it's for your own purpose, for your own use.
If you're looking for storm damage on somebody else's property,
That's not recreational.
That's not recreational. But if I'm looking for storm damage
On your own property, if you're trying to find a cow that got away or got out, and there aren't any cattle farms here anymore, but right. So and drones are very popular in the agricultural industry. They're getting more and more popular for uses exactly like that, where someone has a lot of ag land and there's a tornado that comes through. They want to see what's happened on a piece of property. They don't have to go drive around anymore. They can, if they have a drone, they can fly it and take a look. If it's over your property, it's pretty much going to be a recreational use. If it's over someone else's, it's not going to be. If you're using it for the purpose of turning in photographs to the government, turning in photographs to environmental organizations, those kinds of things, it's not a recreational use. It doesn't matter whether you charge for it, whether you make a living doing it, it's considered commercial. What that means is that your drone is going to be regulated by the FAA. You have to be a certified drone operator. And there's a process to go through for getting that certification. Part of that process is staying away from highways, staying away from, you're not allowed to fly over people, because if the thing falls, I mean, these things are not small. But the drone regulates, the typical regulation kicks in once it's more than 55 pounds or can go faster than 100 miles an hour. Once you hit either of those categories, then your drone is regulated by the FAA and it has to be controlled. Now, some of these drones weigh a couple hundred pounds. If you think about it, the battery capacity to make a drone fly and to go any distance and to take a picture and transmit it back to someone and all that takes a lot of energy. And so the batteries are the weight. And there are, of course, prop-driven that are like small airplanes. They all fit into this category. They're basically unmanned aerial vehicles, unmanned aerial systems. There's a lot of different acronyms that are coming out about it. And because the feds haven't really set up a regulatory system, it's not standard. Maryland calls them UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles. Anyway, so what happens is, and the reason Maryland passed their law is that the drone industry has a strong lobby here in Maryland. The fact is that a lot of defense contractors are located here in Maryland. And so there was some movement. There was a company that was using a farm property that was fairly substantial that got complaints from neighbors, and a county, it was here on the shore, a county was going to start restricting where you could fly drones. And Maryland got a hold of that and said, no, you have to be, only the state can control where this happens. And so, which means that the county can't zone it at all. It's fully preempted in Maryland. Only the state can control where this occurs. Now, why it matters for you, and your question was on point. I have had clients with agricultural properties where the neighbor flies over constantly and sends pictures into the Department of the Environment and alleges there are these problems going on and that this is happening. That they'll take a picture of a prime example. In my case, there was a well rig on site because they had to pull a pump, put a new pump in, and it was a deep well, and so they had the rig set up and everything. These people took pictures, sent them over to the Department of the Environment and said they're drilling a new well and they don't have a permit. Of course, the Department of the Environment sends out people to find out what's going on. Well, they weren't drilling a well, they were fixing a pump. The fact of the matter is that the person didn't understand what they were seeing. And that's very common with drone and aerial photographs. What you think you see in that picture isn't necessarily what is really happening. In our case, we were pulling the pump. You have to have a rig to pull the pump because there's pipe that goes down several hundred feet, and that's how it works. And if you're a residential homeowner who's never done any agricultural work, never done any well drilling work, you don't have a clue as to how that works. And so that was the circumstance that we were in. And this was happening week after week after week. The work it really got out of control. But for your purposes, those are the kinds of things that are a problem for agriculture, as opposed to the good use of drones by agriculture, by the agricultural community. So what do you do about it? It's like, unless you know for certain what's going on with the drone, the first thing to do is to try and figure out who owns it, if you can. If you know it's your neighbor, you can go over, hopefully there's a decent relationship. If there's not, send them a letter, get your lawyer to send them a letter. If it really gets elevated, send them a registered letter. Ask the police officers, and they'll mention later, if you report the trespass or the problem to them, and they can go over and talk to the neighbor. But get some sort of communication going with the drone owner and ask them not to do it.
So the drone coming over is a trespass?
Well, not yet. The law is completely unclear on that question. It is not definitely a trespass, but it might be a trespass. And there's let me say one thing first and I'll get you. There's a case from the Supreme Court in the 1980s against Dow Chemical. Dow Chemical had a 20, I'm gonna get that wrong, it was 2,000 acres, I think, was their facility. And they had it all fenced and secured, it was all research-oriented kind of thing. And EPA flew over and took pictures. They wouldn't let EPA in to inspect, and so EPA flew over and took pictures, and the Supreme Court said airspace is public, and taking pictures of the ground below, you don't have any expectation of privacy within your fence in that open area. Now, that's different if you're talking about curtilage, the area immediately around your buildings. It's different when you're talking about looking in windows. Those things are going to be a trespass without a doubt. My view, I would be, I would push a case and say that if you're not higher than I can throw a stick at, then you're going to be trespassing. I think that's where it needs to go. Whether it gets there or not, I don't know. But right now, there aren't any court decisions in Maryland. There aren't any court decisions nationally, really. There's a couple here and there. For example, in Wisconsin, there was a court case where the neighbor took pictures and alleged that someone was operating a junkyard on their property, and turned it over to the local planning authorities. The local zoning brought an enforcement action, and it went up to the Supreme Court, and not the United States Supreme Court, but the state courts. Ultimately, the state court system said, no, you needed a warrant to do that because you're the government and you're getting those pictures. Because it's a private party that gets the pictures, if the government sends them to do that, yes, they need a warrant. If they don't send them to do it and someone just does it on their own and then turns it over to the government, it's questionable as to whether or not. But that one case, they decided that the government could not use those photographs to enforce. You had
Yeah, so technically, could somebody, in fact, just shoot that drone down? I mean, without trying to check to see, I mean, it's over your property.
There's a whole lot of reasons why you can't. There aren't specific laws that say you can't, but there are laws about criminal mischief and intentional destruction of property. That's a piece of property that belongs to someone else. You're not allowed, unless you don't do it. You're just not allowed to do it. It is, there's, some of these things cost $10,000, $15,000, so there's property damage that's involved in it. If you're near a building and you're shooting a firearm, chances are you violated the criminal code as to where you're allowed to use firearms. So you don't do it. And they are working on a couple of things, and I've seen them. It's interesting that as a wildlife management major, we used to go out and catch ducks and beavers and everything else and tag them and all that kind of stuff for scientific research. One of the things we would do is throw nets out over a flock of ducks that are sitting, and you would get them and ban them. There are some devices like that throw nets that will catch a drone, but you gotta be, it's like a cannon, you gotta be in the right place at the right time. The drone has to come in the right area for you to catch it. I'm not so sure that they're gonna take off, but there are some of those things being developed. There are also some jamming devices that will interfere with the drone's ability to fly. Certainly if it lands on your property, you would be able to take it to the police and say, I don't know who this is. Now, the good thing is that if you're not a recreational user, if you're not a recreational, that's the wrong way to say that. That's a whole different thing these days. If you're not a recreational drone pilot and you're not exempt, your drone is required to broadcast an identification. So if you, for commercial drones, you're required to broadcast an identification. And there are ways to catch those signals and figure out who owns that drone, who's permitted to fly it, whether they have licenses.
Who can catch that signal?
I don't know the answers to that yet.
What was the question?
Yeah.
Repeat the question.
Who can catch those signals? Who can read those signals? I'm not sure. I'm sure that the FAA has a system in place for doing that. Who has the equipment and what to do or how to get a hold of that person? I don't know the answer to that
There's
yet.
gotta be an app for it.
Can you obtain your own?
Well, right. That's what I'm getting at. And I know that there are lots of clients who would want to be able to push a button and see whose drone that is. And that's what the FAA is headed for. They don't want drones other than the recreational, go have fun, fly your drone. Like when I was a kid, we used to shoot the rockets up, and the parachute would open, they'd come down. Those were all fun. If you're doing that, fine. Then they got so you could put a camera on them and they would go up and take a picture over your house, that kind of thing. If you're doing that stuff, that's all fun and games, and the FAA really doesn't care. They don't want to be bothered with it. But if you're doing it for any non-recreational reason, you're required, those drones are required to broadcast an identification signal. And the idea being that eventually we'll be able to track all of this and get back to whoever's causing this problem. Now, for example, last time I read any estimates, there are probably just in the United States, well over 30,000 drones flying around. They're everywhere.
There's
Kids,
gotta be higher than that.
kids have them. I think it's probably higher too. That was an estimate. That was an estimate of what they expected. But see, that was also before they had the ID requirements and other things. So that data has got to be updated based on these new requirements. And so the new regulations, and the FAA has just put these things on their webpage this past few months, where they say you've got to be registered, and they make it very clear. If you're doing something other than just having fun with that drone, you don't get the recreational exemption. You've got to pass the test to be a certified pilot. And the part of the reason is, as I said, these bigger drones, they get very heavy. It doesn't take much to top 55 pounds with some of these drones. And so they fit into all the regulatory requirements. But, so if it falls out of the sky, unless you're in an area where you know it's safe, somebody can get hurt. And that's why they have restrictions about flying drones over crowds at concerts, flying drones over highways. You know, if a 75-pound or 150-pound drone drops out of the sky onto your windshield, it's going to be a big problem. So there are, and they've thought through, at least recently, a lot of these things and realized, okay, we've got to have some restrictions. And most of the states are just deferring to the feds and letting the feds make up the controls. You had a question all the way in the back.
Oh, I was gonna ask, do you have any rights to disable the drone if it comes over your property? So
Well, if you
answered
have the
that.
capability, and those things aren't very publicly available yet, but I have a feeling that they're gonna be much more available. And if you can jam the signal and have the drone
I was
come
gonna shoot
down.
it out of the sky, so that's, you got it.
No, you can't shoot it. Don't shoot it. Did I say that already? Don't shoot it. Because you're gonna, it's just the problems that'll come from that. It's just not worth it. But the jamming signal, the idea being that most of these things are the 4-rotor or 5 or 6 rotor kind of setups. Very few non-defense oriented drones are the like small planes or something that run with a prop and fly that way. Almost all of them are sort of the helicopter type, where they have a rotary and it lifts. And so with those, typically, if the power dies, they have built into the motors for those a mechanism where it slows its descent so it doesn't just crash down to the ground. So if you can disable it and it comes down, then you take it and you take it to these gentlemen here and you file a report and tell them there's a problem. Whether or not you can take the camera off it, look at what's on the camera, take the little chip or the memory cards, the flash memory cards, whether you can take those out and look at what's on them or not, all of that is really up in the air.
But nowadays, whoever's flying the drone has a live shot.
Most likely, yes.
You know,
They do.
like a live stream of it.
Right, they get a feed of it, yeah. And so that also reduces the weight. They have a live feed, then they don't have to have the mechanism on board to take and keep the pictures. So it's hard to tell, and these things are advancing every day, literally. But the speed and the use of them is becoming much more of a problem than anyone would ever think. And they are dangerous. You know, I have not. In fact, I did. Remember Kurt that worked for the cattlemen's?
Yeah.
I got him to check around with some of the folks that have animal agriculture. Cattle in particular was who I had him talk to. And there have not been any instances where, you think, okay, if you scare the cows and they all take off, number one, it's bad for the beef. But number two, it's a hazard for a lot of different reasons. But apparently they're not. Most animals the people that have the ranches and that have the animals have not experienced a problem. And a lot of them use drones, again, to track lost animals or because they're on larger pieces of property. And so they've not experienced, across the country anyway, the situations where the animals are frightened or panicked by the drones. But to me, I thought that would be something that probably would happen, but apparently it doesn't. And you know, it's not, cows aren't all that smart, so who knows, but.
If the drone lands or crashes onto your property, does that constitute a trespass, or does?
Sure. If it contacts your land, absolutely, it's a trespass.
Okay.
Now, if you jam the signal and it lands, that's not a trespass because you invited it to land, basically. But if the thing physically touches your property, absolutely it's a trespass. And it's not clear that flying isn't a trespass. For example, there's a case in the 1930s where a neighbor was convicted of trespass for holding a camera over a fence and taking pictures of what was going on the other side. Because that neighbor reached across the fence in order to be able to see down, that was a trespass. I see that as being very similar to these drones. But the courts haven't caught up with this yet. The state legislatures aren't touching it. There really isn't, it's gonna have to be what happens. Somebody's gonna have to bring in a lawsuit for trespass or nuisance. Your tortious interference is very interesting because tortious interference, if you can show that they're doing it sufficiently enough that they're interfering with a contract or interfering with your ability to make a living, it's a tough standard, but at the same time, that would certainly fit. But until those lawsuits get up to the appellate courts and we get some written opinions, we don't know where that's going to go.
Well, wouldn't with the 1938 case and the tortious interference all tied into U.S. versus Carnegie in 1946? Because that case was actually a chicken farmer, and and the U.S. and the Army Air Corps.
Right.
Well, there was no Air Force at this point. The Army Air Corps was performing low altitude maneuvers, and the U.S. Supreme Court determined that we own the first 83 feet above ground level. That's our airspace.
So far, that's the only case that gives it that kind of.
But there's no other precedent contradicting that.
Right.
So
that's true.
From the ground that we own, the 83 feet above is sovereign. It's ours. It's not even regulated. It's not even the states. It's ours.
Well,
and that was done by the. If you're familiar with U.S. versus Cosby.
I am not intimately familiar with it, but I know what case you're talking about, and that's a very interesting point. Typically, it used to be that your property was your pie slice from the center of the earth all the way up as far as you could go. If you owned it, you owned all of that.
But that's not.
But that's not the case anymore. And
but it was clearly defined in that U.S. Supreme Court case, where because that farmer lost his entire flock because of the low altitude maneuvers. They were outside chickens,
okay,
and they smothered themselves because they all huddled up against a wall and they all died. And because of that, the U.S. Supreme Court interfered. That the Army Air Corps had interfered with this farmer's ability to make a living. Ergo, the first 80. So the Army Air Corps had produced all the records, and the U.S. Supreme Court said, okay, 83 feet is your.
That's interesting. I know the case, but I'm not sure I was aware of the delineation of the height.
What it says here in the very first, says here, respondents own dwelling in a chicken farm near a municipal airport. The path glide of one of the runways of the airport passed directly over the respondent's property at 83 feet, which was 67 feet above the house, 63 feet above the barn, and 18 feet above the highest tree.
No,
that's the case law.
That's the kind of thing that, ultimately someone's gonna have to file a suit. But noise for chickens and turkeys as well, any fowl that will gather like that and overheat, that's very different than cattle. That's a whole different, it's not about a standard.
Well, that's why I brought it up when you said cattle, it wasn't that big of a deal. But there are people that do go out, that are growing outside now.
Yes,
and
that's right.
A drone's gonna scare the daylights out of chickens.
I would think so.
I mean, if
Even
I can
in
shine
the
a
house,
flashlight on my ceiling and do this and clear the floor
right.
to one side.
Even
Even
in a house, I would think the noise could scare them.
Everything.
Because they are loud.
That's why they're called chicken.
Yeah.
And you mentioned this with the junkyard and the neighbor, but, so if pictures were acquired by an environmental group against a farmer, could they bring a case based off that, or would they have to have a warrant or something to be able to gather that?
The only time a warrant applies is when it's the government. Whether it's criminal or civil, if they're gonna come onto your land and conduct an investigation, they have to have a warrant. Criminal in particular, civil, it depends on the circumstances. If you have a permit, for example, in Maryland, you have a nutrient management plan, you have you have permits for sewage sludge, permits for manure management, if you have your discharge permit because you don't discharge, which cracks me up, but you have permits, and when you apply for a permit with the state, one of the things that's in the application says you're giving them access to come and inspect for compliance. So they don't need a warrant for that purpose, but if they come on to investigate for some other purpose, then they do. Environmental organizations don't have to have warrants, and that doesn't mean that the government can use that information that's gathered for prosecuting purposes. I don't know, that hasn't been decided yet. Like I said, there was that case in Wisconsin where the court said, no, you can't use something that someone else gathers to conduct a prosecution or enforcement case, and that was a zoning enforcement case. So, that's up in the air. Now, the other thing about at the federal level, about environmental regulations under the Clean Water Act, as well as most of the waste statutes, RIPRA and Superfund kind of cases, or statutes, there are citizen suit provisions. And I've dealt with a lot of those where groups file a citizen suit against someone because they haven't convinced the government to do a Clean Water Act enforcement case. And so there are standards for how that works. They have to give notice, all kinds of things. It's a complex kind of process. But the organizations themselves, if they gather information, can bring their own lawsuit if they feel like the government's not doing it. That's under federal law. And there are some really weird local laws that I've come across. Sometimes, in fact, one that I'm handling right now, when I called the county attorney and said, I just saw this and my client has gotten this letter and it says under section so-and-so, these people are allowed to come and try and take away his special exception that was issued in 1972. And they don't like it, so they want the county to revisit it. And if you read the code provision they cite, it seems to give anybody the authority to come in and say, I want a hearing on whether or not this person's entitled to keep their special exception. Well, if I built a gas station in 1972 and I've got our tanks, I've been keeping it up and I'm operating it, it's a special exception use, what right does anyone have to come and tell me I have to stop operating my gas station just because you don't like it? It's a really bizarre, and there are weird sections of the county codes that have things like this, and the county attorney, when I called, said, I've never seen that section before. And so as people, particularly non-lawyers, read through the code provisions, they see things that, like the section that I'm fighting over right now, it literally says that any party can do this, can bring this and ask for a hearing on whether or not the special exception is valid or should remain. But it's not an enforcement provision. This is my position. It's not an enforcement provision. It's in a section of the code that talks about if somebody lied in their application, if someone lied in their testimony, or if someone gets a special exception and then does something completely different and tries to claim that they're using their special exception. It's for addressing mistakes. It's for fixing problems before something gets implemented, not 5 decades later when a business is in operation and someone doesn't like it and they want to have their own new hearing over the zoning. But there are these weird sections, and when you read it in a vacuum, it looks like they can do this. But when you read it in light of the whole statute, the whole code section about zoning, and because there's a whole separate section on zoning enforcement. This is all about a hearing officer making a mistake or someone lying to get a special exception and what the hearing officer can do to remedy that. So, read in a vacuum, it makes it look like they're able to do this, but I don't think they are. Stay tuned, we'll see. But, it's, the thing with drones, again, I don't want to go on too much longer, but don't shoot them.
That's a felony.
And I
It's a
don't,
felony if you shoot it.
and I don't do criminal law, so.
Oh, so I can't call you then, huh?
I can send you to a good lawyer. Sir?
I'm one of our agency's drone pilots. I'm gonna tell you now, with today's technology, there could be a drone over your property and you'll never know it's there.
Oh, that's true.
And the chances are they might not even be over your property.
Yep.
I can be 400 foot in the air and 800 foot away, and I can tell that you're texting on your cell phone when they're drone. And it's a $4,000 drone. So any of these big agricultural companies or organizations that are trying to put you out of business, whatever, they're gonna have stuff that far exceeds what we have. So, I mean, and the jamming devices he's talking about, when they first came out, they were effective with the older Phantom style drones. But these new drones, when they lose signal, they don't fall, they just automatically go home. Where they launch at. So,
Well, we gotta introduce you guys. Hold on a
Yeah.
second. We gotta do this right. Come on up here.
Go ahead.
Hey, stay up here, Tony. We want to get Paul up here too. So we're getting to our Q&A. So we were really fortunate because our county is very supportive of our agriculture, and Megan called them up, and they said, and now granted, I don't think they told y'all what you're doing, and I forgot your names already.
Burley Williams.
Burley Williams?
John Allison Dreeny.
John Allison. Dreeny. Got it.
Whole thing, John.
So, John, so we got this. John, anyway, they're here too just to answer questions because they are supportive of us. Now, granted, we got to try and do things right, and so now's your chance to ask questions. So we've got our legal people here, we've got our enforcement, but you're absolutely right. My son-in-law flies drones, and he's into that racing stuff, and those things, man, what they can do with those, it blows my mind. I just crash.
They are amazing. And he had ours up like 3 or 4 times this last month, and I've been with him as a spotter, and sometimes even we lose sight of him. You can't even see him. And
But you're right.
And he can see what's going on.
Right. Now if it loses signal, it doesn't crash. It turns around and goes back to the launch site.
Yep.
So they're already programmed for that, which is, there's a lot of been updated, new. You can walk into, how many of you guys have been to Costco or Sam's Club lately? You can walk in and pick one up.
Sure.
They're a couple $100. And they've got a camera on it. Like you said, those cameras are fantastic nowadays. And someone mentioned earlier, when my son-in-law flies his, he's looking in goggles and it's recording on his phone.
Wow.
So, because they want to record
It's how
the
it's
course.
steered.
Yeah, the course. They're recording the course so they can learn to memorize the courses so they can go through. And to watch some of these kids fly those, it just blows. How do they do it? I don't know.
A lot of practice.
Anyway, so questions, guys, feel free to ask.
One question. Assuming to identify the people on the property through a vehicle, and it's out of state normally, how do I go about identifying that person? And beyond that, what organization are they with? And if they're with the environmental organization that's there to do me harm with my business, I can't come down to your office and say I had the tag number from Arkansas, who was driving this vehicle.
Well, we might be able to help you with that by pulling up the registered owner's picture and showing you that and saying this is our guy. We can always do that, but your best bet is to call us when it's happening, and hopefully we can catch them there. And if you can get pictures and a tag number without putting yourself at risk, that's our best bet. We can always use investigative means and try to find out who the person is.
And then beyond that, if they are there from environmental organizations there to do me harm, how do you go about discovering, find out who they are,
Well,
what organization they're with?
if you
where they get
believe
their
there's,
funding and so forth?
if you believe there's a risk, the only way you can get information as a citizen is if you are involved in a lawsuit and you do discovery and you send interrogatories and documents, all that. It's not an inexpensive or easy process. Sometimes there's things you can find out online about who's a member of what organization or what organization is doing things. They post things online, but it's not an easy process as an individual. And before you can file a lawsuit, you have to be able to say that there's some harm, that they're doing something other than, trespass, sure, you can get them for that. But other than that, it's difficult to figure out what they were there for and why without going through a very lengthy, expensive process.
of the expensive legal process.
Yes.
On my-
There's one thing I want to reiterate. He said, think this through, guys. Get the tag without putting yourself in danger. Don't do something stupid that's going to harm you or somebody else. And that's very important, and I appreciate you saying that.
And trespassing is very minor criminally. It's extremely minor for us typically. If they trespass and they've been notified they're trespassing again, it's gonna be a citation. We're gonna write them a citation, go to court, have a good day. And we're not even gonna put them in handcuffs. So it's that minor as far as the state of Maryland's concerned. Not the way we wanna do it, but that's the way that the state of Maryland has us do it. So it's not worth you getting in a fight over. If you go and punch this person, then you're gonna look at charges that are more serious than the initial trespass charges.
Well, with everything you hear, just these environmental people that ever do you harm, you can't really play it on nice with them.
Well, there is a
Hardball.
peace order process in Maryland as well, which unfortunately is out of control in terms of what it's used for these days. But you can go to a magistrate or a district court judge and fill out a form, and once you identify the person and say, you know, I'm afraid that this person is doing something to harm me or my property or my family, and try and get a peace order that's served, and it's a court order that they're required to stay away.
Everybody's
Not a company.
Not as a person.
Everybody's focusing on trespassing. Maryland law also has harassment, which is a continuing course of conduct meant to annoy, which is good for your neighbors who are flying over your property or whatever. That's a continuing course of conduct that's meant to annoy you. So that's and it's actually more time than trespassing.
Good point. Okay, I think you were next. Just a second, we'll get to you.
In the past, we had problems with four-wheelers, and we had it on video and camera and everything. We were told they could not do anything, even though they knew who they were and everything, but they told us, you have to prove it's them on the camera. And they would tell us that every time they come out.
Well, you were misinformed. If they're trespassing on your property, on a four-wheeler or on foot, or they can be.
Well, this was the state police telling us this.
Okay, I mean, they can be charged. We have to find out who they are to charge them.
Well, we knew who they were, but they told us we need to prove it. And we had them right on camera.
Call the county next time.
Might not be
That's a good question. If they want to call you for a non-emergency, what is the number to use?
It's 410-548-4891. That's our.
And that's Wycomico County.
Yeah, that's a good question. Is there, I heard somewhere there's like a statewide thing now, like 211 or 311 or something like that. Is that coming in?
I'm unaware.
Okay, because some places have it, and I've heard about it, and I was just curious.
MSP has pound 77 or whatever, but.
All right. So we will get that number, guys. Don't worry about it. We will get it and get it out to y'all for Wycomico.
I wanted to tell you about something, and because it involved their agency. A few months back, if you were on the Delmarva Network or Delmarva Poultry Producers, whatever it's called, on Facebook, I was the one that was probed. I gave pursuit legally, maintaining a safe distance, cool state of mind, relaxed. I'm not proud of this guy. I'm not trying to. I chased him for 45 minutes until I could actually have a conversation with the guy. He took me all around Salisbury, down through Snow Hill, and up through Pocomoke before I'm out of their jurisdiction. But I got his tag number, had a conversation with him, had a witness on the phone for the conversation. When I got back to my farm, I called their agency. I knew they were going to do nothing about it. I knew they couldn't, but the reason that I called them is because it was documented. I provided the tag number. I thanked the deputy that showed up. She was exceptionally professional, and she documented it, and now it goes into a file for that property. If this person shows back up, now they can take further action. Unfortunately, you can't do anything unless they stay on the property. You can't do, the only thing you can do is either you can give chase legally, and you have to file all, and you have no right to break any laws whatsoever. You can photograph and you do all that stuff, and if you choose to have a conversation like I did, you can. The guy actually engaged me. I knew he was an environmentalist. He identified himself as such. That being said, I can't get out of the car and drag him out and drag him to his office from Pocomoke. So here you go, I got him. Because I'm going to be the one in the cell. I'm going to be the one in the cell on that one.
Citizens arrest is a misnomer.
But you said something very important. When they show up, it's not that they don't want to do anything, it's that they can't really do much. There's a big difference. And so when you see them not, quote unquote, doing anything, it's not they're not doing anything, but they're documenting, like you said, so that future things can then
Oh,
go.
no, I didn't say they didn't do anything.
Right, I know,
said
but-
they could
But it
not.
appears that way to a lot of people, and that's what's
And
important
that's
to
a
know.
misconception, because what I did was I empowered their agency to do something on the next call.
Right.
They can't do anything because the guy's not there.
Right.
And we have to, as citizens, we have to understand what they can and cannot do. Now, if this guy's standing there beating and banging on my cross auger with a hammer and I've got feed running out, everything else, they're gonna take them away in handcuffs.
Yeah.
They're not gonna repair it for us, but then they're gonna take them away. But if the guy's gone, they caused no damage, and all they did was just, I'm gonna speak bluntly, just pissed us off, get over it. Unfortunately, that's what you're gonna have to deal with.
So the bottom line is you could not identify that person or the organization.
I didn't have the right. I know my own rights. I don't have the right to ask, I don't have the right to try to command them to tell me who that guy is. All I had to do, it is a one-way conversation. Me to them, they keep it.
So if I come to you with a tag number from Arkansas, you
That's
can't
it.
tell me who owns it.
Hey, wait a minute, that might be my car. So
Not necessarily, we can tell you who owns the car, if it's part of a criminal investigation, we can, and if he's trespassing, he's already been told he's trespassed, and he comes back anyways, that is technically a crime, so yeah, we could,
Yes.
yeah. If it's the first time he's there, he's never been told not
But
to
if
be.
he's not there-
If he's not there, there's not much we can do, but we can go to the commissioner. You guys could go to the commissioner, so there are routes we can go, but it is such a minor level of crime, they're not gonna do any jail time for it.
No, and nobody's gonna put a lot of effort into that.
Sure.
But at least it's documented.
Exactly, that's the whole thing. The whole
I use
thing.
that.
I know I'm
It depends on
not
if you're
telling you
them,
what
we
you
don't.
wanna hear.
Right.
Because I'm like you, I'd like to drag him out of the car and thump him a couple of times. But at the end of the day, if I drag him out of the car and thump him, well, those fit my wrist just as easily they fit his.
So I have to
So
wait till
I'm
they
gonna
do
choose,
the
I'm
damage
choosing to keep mine free.
All right, so next question.
I have one thing to add to that, his point and his point. One of the things I've got, well, my law student left that was working on this, so I've gotta find a new one, is we're trying to go around and map sort of where criminal trespass is higher for ag operations around the country, to then come back and develop something that can go either to a county or the state to kind of figure out, okay, we actually do need.
It's
to
definitely
bump
going
it
up and down the corridor of 13.
The other thing about the notice issue that he mentioned, that I'll say, is that not only for their purposes, but in the event that it becomes a harassment, which is a great point, or something more, you've got that for your purposes too. Civil, you can bring civil litigation in the event that it gets to that point, and you have that record.
All right, Far, you're next.
So, my question was for officers, if the farmer sees that, there was a person with a drone there, what's the best way to go about it?
If you can safely get a picture of the guy, that's great, but call us first, that's the first thing, and just know the drone life, battery life is low, they're not gonna be up very long, they're gonna go home. So if you could visually follow it home, see where it goes as we're on the way there, and let us know where the guys are. But I'll let you discuss the drones.
It's like we were discussing earlier with FAA and how they regulate a lot. Technically, Maryland has no laws when it comes to drones. But the FAA is, when it comes to the 107 license, which they're the ones that issue it, which is to do any type of non-recreational. You have certain requirements you have to meet. Like technically, when I fly a drone, I have to have a physical observer, not just me. I have to have somebody else to watch that drone. Can't go above 400 feet. I can't lose sight of that drone. So if they have their 107 license and they're doing all that, technically you should be able to see them. If you can identify them, or you can get information of us identify them, then they can be reported to the FAA, and the FAA can do something with their 107 license.
What's the likelihood that they're actually gonna say they're commercial? I mean, what gives them the incentive to be honest, especially when you're dealing with somebody that's
Well, if you
not
have a
supposed to
name,
be there, so-
it's FAA gives you a license. I actually have a license that has my name.
But you're commercial.
Yes.
And they can look, you can look him up by his name, you can look up the license.
What's the incentive